Hello and welcome back to I Am the Lore Keeper. I'm Brandon DeGro, and today I am the Lore Keeper. I've got a couple of my friends here today to discuss our new topic. You can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Phi. I've known Letters, or Brandon, I guess, for over a decade now at this point.
Hi, I am Bee. Very confusing names, but I've known Letters or Brandon since I think about 2021 is when we met.
Somewhere around there. So before we get into this episode, I want to ask, at what point would you generally say you need to stop?
Like it's getting out of hand?
Things are getting out of hand.
I don't know, someone's gonna get hurt? Someone's doing something illegal?
Okay.
Yeah, as soon as there's like danger, I think.
There's consequences, like severe consequences to these actions.
All right. Well, I'm going to read a story today that will have you repeatedly thinking, this needs to stop. So we're going to start off with our main character, Charles Guiteau. Charles Guiteau was born in Freeport, Illinois on September 18th, 1841. His mother passed away when he was 7, and he was raised just by his religious father, Luther Guiteau, and Luther imparted the same religious fervor that he had into his son, Charles. Luther was a pretty normal religious man for the era, other than the fact that he believed he would never die. Charles had a hard time making friends, and he didn't have any in Freeport as he became an adult due to what was considered his, quote, offensive egotism. Throughout his life, he felt that he was destined for something important. He ended up going to college in Ann Arbor, but didn't stay there very long. When he was 18, he left to go join the Oneida community, founded by John Humphrey Noyes, who was the mentor of his father Luther. He did so claiming he was drawn there by an irresistible power that I was not at liberty to disobey. The Oneida community was a religious socialist commune in Oneida, New York, that was centered around a brick building that was frequently expanding, known as the Mansion House. It had 35 apartments for over 300 people, and there was a wide range of communal amenities like a theater and a Turkish bath. It was a big, fancy house. Luther really wanted to live there, but the idea was very unpopular with his first wife and then with his second wife, so he never got to move there, because they were both uncomfortable with Noyes' belief in what he called complex marriage. Noyes believed that monogamous love was, quote, selfish, unhealthy, and pernicious, and he wanted members to have a wide variety of partners to not fall in love with just one person. In order to limit pregnancies, he preached what he called male continence, or in his words, quote, intercourse up to the very moment of emission is voluntary, entirely under the control of the moral faculty, and can be stopped at any point. In other words, the presence and the motions can be continued or stopped at will, and it is only the final crisis of emission that is automatic or uncontrollable. If you say that this is impossible, I answer that I know it is possible. Nay, that it is easy. So I guess John Humphrey Noyes was kind of the pullout king of the community.
Damn.
Crazy confidence.
Yeah. Nah, easy shit. Anyone could do it. So Charles Guiteau moved to the Oneida community, and he was really hyped up by the idea of complex marriage. And early on, he found 3 spiritual marriages, but they left him very quickly, and he did not find much success with complex marriage afterward. He didn't really fit into the commune, and he was such an outsider that none of the women liked, to the degree that they started calling him Charles Guiteau.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was a pretty great burn. Everyone else lived with more humility than he did. They were more eager to do the shitty jobs, and Charles thought that Noyes should be really grateful to him for showing up, rather than him being grateful to Noyes for giving him a spot. And that offensive egotism that made him really unpopular in Freeport really kind of followed him here too. He wanted to be famous in a way that did not really fit with his humble commune lifestyle. There was a time that he was walking through the grounds around the mansion house, and someone walking behind him noticed that he dropped a piece of paper, and he picked it up, and it said on it, Chas J. Guiteau of England, Premier of the British Lion, will lecture this evening at 7 o'clock.
Wow.
Yeah, not from England, not a Premier of the British Lion, just a boy from Illinois. So Charles did not fit in there, but he was convinced all the same that in time he was going to replace Noyes as the leader of the community and ultimately become President of the United States.
The ego already is so high.
Crazy.
This is amazing. He should stop right now.
Yeah, this is all already. You should probably stop. Chill the fuck out, Charles. Yeah. So there was a practice in this community called criticisms that Noyes encouraged, where the people that you lived and worked the closest to would sit around you in a circle in a room and give criticisms of your worst qualities. And Charles was very frequently accused of egotism and conceit. He left.
I wonder why.
Yeah. In 1865, he left after 6 years there, and he left declaring that he was destined to accomplish some very important mission. His plan was that he was going to start a religious newspaper that he called the Theocrat. He declared that it would be, quote, a warm friend of the Bible, though it may develop many new and strange biblical theories. So he worked on this for 4 months.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
He was writing Bible DLC?
He was writing Bible DLC.
Oh my god.
This is already.
So he worked on the Theocrat for 4 months and then gave up and begged Noyes to let him come back to Oneida. He stayed at Oneida for another year, and then he moved away one night under the cover of darkness because he was going to be the target of a criticism and he didn't want to deal with it. So he was worried, though, that by leaving, he lost his eternal salvation. And he was saying that every night he was haunted by the idea that he was damned, and this is why he was unable to do business and spent the next year not really having a job, just kind of living off of whatever savings and inheritances from family that he could. Then he would serve as a law clerk for a few months, and he stood for the bar exam. He was examined by an attorney who was known as Charles Reed, who, according to his brother-in-law, said, quote, asked him 3 questions and he answered 2 and missed 1, and that was the way he got to be a lawyer.
Times have changed.
Yeah.
Or not.
It stands to reason Charles Guiteau was not a good lawyer. There was a psychiatrist who would study him years later and said that the style of his conduct was such as to convince all the lawyers who were present that he was a monomaniac. There was a time that he jumped over the bar separating the jury from the rest of the court, and he shook his fist right in a juror's face. And the whole courtroom laughed at him, then convicted his client without needing to leave their seats.
Damn. So it is like a death sentence to get this guy as your lawyer.
You do not want Charles Guiteau to be your lawyer.
Is he like the 1800s version of Gene Parmesan?
He really liked the prestige and respect of being a lawyer, and he was often just pulling out his business cards and just admiring them. His business card had 8 lines of text on the front alone, and it bragged about his building having an elevator in it.
Dude, this is just Patrick Bateman. We found the real guy.
This is the OG. This is the source.
The back of the card had 14 lines, and it was a list of references from businessmen, most of which he barely knew and the rest of which he'd never met at all. He tried to buy a newspaper around this time, and he was seeking investments by going to rich people and telling prospective investors that, hey, I can win you any statewide office you want. I'll just write good fluff pieces on you. But after 2 months of searching, he did not find any investors, so he quit law and became a traveling evangelist for a year, preaching the beliefs of John Humphrey Noyes, such as that Christ's second coming already happened in 70 AD.
Okay. Who, though? Like,
he was not good at being a traveling evangelist either. There was a time that he was giving a lecture on the street called Is There a Hell? And it was reviewed by the Newark Daily Journal. They said of it, is there a hell? 50 deceived people are of the opinion that there ought to be. Charles never paid for his train tickets, explaining that he was doing God's work and has no money. Sometimes this worked, but sometimes the conductor, quote, was not a Christian man, evidently, and would throw him off the train. He would also never pay for hotel rooms. He would often just sneak out in the middle of the night, or sometimes he would leave his room to go to a lecture and then immediately skip town from his lecture. But hotels were a lot more adamant on going after you for non-payment than the trains, so he did wind up in jail a couple times for this. So sometime after leaving Oneida, he met Annie Bunn, who was the librarian at a YMCA that he visited. She respected his piety. She respected that he never drank beer, never did drugs, and he was praying all the time. But he was a very shitty husband to her. If she contradicted him, he would sometimes kick her outside or lock her in a closet all night.
oof.
In 1872, Charles got interested in politics. At the time, Horace Greeley was running for president, a big newspaper magnate, and Charles would attend a bunch of campaign rallies and make speeches in Greeley's favor. They were not very popular. Greeley probably had absolutely no clue Charles was even doing this, but Charles had it in his head that he was going to win the presidency for Greeley, and then Greeley lost the election. Shortly after this, he came home with syphilis, and Annie sued for divorce. So over time, he was finding himself with more and more money troubles, because he was not a good lawyer, and traveling evangelist is not a very good paying job.
So wait, did he do all this stuff like during, like, because you said 1870, but before this would have been the Civil War, right? Like 1865?
He stayed in Oneida until 1865.
Okay.
So over this time, he started asking a lot of people that he knew for money. He never said it as, hey, I need money. He would always insist he was going to pay it back, but he never did. People knew that if they gave Charles a loan, they were not getting their money back. And mostly he was getting these loans, quote unquote loans, from his sister Frances and her husband George Scoville. One time he ended a letter with them saying, "But to leave this, money to meet my personal wants is what I desire now. Right soon."
Then get a job, man.
He would often go
Just
stay
leeching
with
off
them
of
after
everyone.
getting out of jail. Yeah, no, he was very much a leech.
I swear to God, if he's somehow related to the guy who did like Scoville heat units,
And the story ends with Charles eating really hot peppers and having a great resistance to them.
so he claimed.
So eventually people stop loaning Charles money, and so he responds to this by suing everyone he can.
Is he representing himself? Because
Yes.
he's not gonna get anything.
Very
ever.
often, yes. He was suing. A lot of newspapers would write about him being a bad lawyer, and he would sue them for libel. Never got anything out of that. And most notably, he sued the Oneida community and John Noyes, claiming he was owed $9,000 in back pay. And then the lawyer that he hired went to go speak to Noyes, realized Charles lied about almost everything, and dropped the case.
Amazing.
But Charles did not let this dissuade him. He wrote a letter to Noyes saying, "If you intend to pay my claim, say so. If you want to spend 10 or 20 years in Sing Sing and have your communities wiped out, don't pay it." So
Wow.
obviously, John Noyes knows that Charles does not have a case at all, so he ignores it. And then Charles writes to him again, saying, "I infer from your silence that you do not intend to pay the claim. All right, if you find yourself arrested within a week, it'll be your own fault." Predictably, John Noyes was not arrested. He wrote that he didn't have any ill will for Charles, but he actually prayed for him on the regular because the man was clearly insane. Luther Guiteau said that he would have had Charles institutionalized if only he could afford the fee to put him in an asylum. And his brother John Guiteau wrote that Charles was, quote, "capable of any folly, stupidity, or rascality."
Damn.
Once while he was staying with Frances, she had him examined by a physician who advised her to have him institutionalized. And then, like he did at Oneida, Charles just snuck away in the middle of the night before they had the chance to do it.
I don't want to get in there criticism.
Yeah. Would have gotten in the way of his big plans.
All these haters trying to keep me from being the president of the United States by telling me I'm mentally insane and stuff.
So by 1880, Charles had wandered his way to Boston, and he's trying to fully dive into politics at this point. He's reading about it all the time, trying to stay up to date on it. And he decides that he wants to get a job in politics. And the best way was through the spoils system. He wasn't going to get a job because he was good at it. He wasn't going to push for that. He was going to do work for a candidate and get a job as a reward. That was his plan. So he took the speech that he did in favor of Horace Greeley, and he adapted it for the expected Republican presidential nominee, Ulysses S. Grant, who was predicted to go up against Winfield Hancock for the Democrats, and he titled it Grant versus Hancock. Then
He couldn't even write a new speech. He just reused the old one he used.
Hold up, B, because Grant lost the nomination, so then he just changed the title to Garfield versus Hancock. When
Oh
James
my
Garfield
God.
won.
No.
Every source that I've read says that he pretty much only changed the title. So then he got on a ship to New York for the Republican convention, convinced that there was a political office in his future, and also fleeing charges of not paying for hotel rooms. So on his way to New York, the ship that he's on collided with another, and it was crazy. The boiler exploded and utter chaos happened. The lights went out, people panicked. One guy shot himself as the boat started to sink and was lit on fire. 30 passengers died, but Charles made it out, and he considered his survival to be proof that he was destined for something important.
Okay, I have a question. The
Yes.
guy that shot himself, did the boat catch on fire, or did he shoot himself and then he got caught on fire?
The boat caught on fire, and then he shot himself.
Okay.
So Charles has renewed faith in his importance. And he has his speech, and he's eager to get his job. So he starts stalking Republican members of the government. Every day throughout the campaign, he either visited the Fifth Avenue Hotel that was kind of a unofficial campaign headquarters where they would meet up a lot, or he would stalk the official campaign headquarters, and he would just say hello and greet every single important person that he saw. He especially went after the vice president-elect, Chester A. Arthur, who claimed to have met him possibly as many as 20 times wherever he was. On multiple occasions, Guiteau actually showed up at Chester Arthur's door and greeted the butler holding his Garfield against Hancock speech in his hands.
No, you gotta do something about that guy. You can't let him be showing up to your house, man.
that is a lot.
Is this pre-Secret Service?
The Secret Service existed, but it was still more of a counterfeiting service than like a presidential bodyguard service at the time.
Yeah.
It didn't really have the role that it does today yet.
Yeah.
So, obviously, they never invited him in to Chester Arthur's house, but Charles, regardless, claimed to have been on free and easy terms with the future vice president, who he was constantly...
Oh, yeah, I saw his butler once on the other side of a door.
We're buds, we're bros.
He kicked me out, and we're best buds.
So he was constantly pushing for the right to do stump speeches for James Garfield. And eventually, Arthur just kind of, sure, whatever, go ahead, do it, just leave me alone. And what that led to was Charles speaking for a couple of minutes, claiming it was too hot and he didn't like the lights, and then stopping after, again, just a couple minutes. But when Garfield won the presidency, Charles was absolutely sure that it was because of his speech. So
everything is about him. Just
everything. So because he clearly got James Garfield elected, he was entitled to a job. So he was thinking, what job would be best suited for me? And so, on Garfield being elected, he writes a letter to President-elect Garfield saying he was interested in being appointed as the U.S. Consul General to Austria.
Why?
Okay.
Well, you see, he explained that since he practiced law in New York and Chicago, he was clearly well qualified to be the Consul General to Austria. Also,
yeah, that translates it all.
Also, he was about to marry a wealthy heiress that would establish some respect to the position. Said heiress thought that he was kind of a stalker. He heard that she had money, he sent her unsolicited letters, was following her around the street, and would knock on her door repeatedly.
How has no one, shot this guy or something? He's just stalking everyone.
So, obviously, President Garfield is getting a lot of letters from people saying that they would be good for jobs and that they want jobs, but Charles' letter actually did stand out to him. He remembered it. Quote, as an illustration of unparalleled audacity and impudence.
Amazing.
Getting probably hundreds of letters about it, but he remembers this asshole. The day after Garfield is inaugurated, Charles takes a train from New York to Washington, D.C., nearly broke, but expecting an incoming job at the White House in exchange for his support. He writes another note to Garfield, offering congratulations for his election, and he was jumping from boarding house to boarding house, sometimes putting off rent by telling the landlord, don't worry, I'm getting a really big job soon. I'll be able to pay you not before too long. He was going to the White House and visiting very often, but the first time he went a couple of days after inauguration, it was absolutely packed with similar people looking for spots and trying to meet new officials. And he just couldn't find the space to meet anyone. So after a few hours, he goes home and he thinks on it, and he writes to President Garfield that he changed his mind. You see, he much preferred Paris to Vienna, so he'd rather be Consul General to France than Austria.
Oh my God.
The audacity of this man.
With this letter, he included a copy of his speech.
The same fucking one?
Yeah, the one.
Oh my God.
Garfield versus Hancock. So he keeps trying to visit the White House over the coming days, and eventually he gets his meeting with President Garfield. He walks into the room, he announces that he's an applicant for the Paris consulship, and he hands the president a copy of the speech he's been carrying around.
Dude, get rid of this speech. Come on.
On the front of this copy of the speech, he wrote the words Paris consulship and drew a line connecting it to his name.
Wow.
Just in case the president didn't hear him say he was an applicant, he would remember from this. And then he leaves after just giving him the speech.
Didn't say anything, but just here you go.
I think he just offered a sentence or two of words, but I couldn't find any record of what he said exactly. I think it was just pleasantries. Pretty much he showed up, said some pleasantries, gave the president a copy of his speech with Paris consulship scribbled on it, and then left.
Well, that's clear. That's all you need.
Yeah, what else do you need?
Hi, here's my name. Here's my speech. All right,
he gave
later.
him the speech. What more does he need?
Of course, yeah.
Garfield's secretary, Joseph Stanley Brown, claimed to have met Charles around 15 times, and that he was almost always either waiting in the president's anteroom, telling a doorman to deliver notes to the president, or just sitting on a bench outside in Lafayette Street staring at the White House. In March, there was a ball at the White House that Charles showed up to where he found the First Lady, told her he was one of the men that made Mr. Garfield president, handed her his business card, then left. Charles was particularly annoying to the Secretary of State, James Blaine. After his last visit to the White House, Charles was told that his application had been forwarded to Secretary of State James Blaine. So he went to see the secretary himself and managed to run into an elevator after him, catching him alone. While they were in between floors, Charles said he intended to be the consul general to Paris and gave Blaine a copy of his speech.
Bro, oh my God.
The same.
They're going to know his speech more than they know him at this point.
They're going to see him like, oh, it's the fucking speech guy again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he keeps pestering the Secretary of State, and eventually James Blaine gets rid of him by just saying, look, you can get this appointment if you can get the recommendation of Senator John Logan. Clearly did not expect the two to ever meet. So one night, Senator Logan is in bed in his hotel room in Washington, and he hears rustling outside of the suite's bedroom.
Oh, no.
He goes outside of the bedroom to investigate, and next to the door, he sees Charles sitting in a chair. He gets up, greets him by name, and hands him a copy of the Garfield against Hancock speech, saying, this is the speech that elected the President of the United States, Mr. Garfield.
Oh, my God. There's got to be someone to stop him. I see why that's the question at the top. They're just like, it just keeps going and no one's doing anything about this guy.
So then he tells Logan he's waiting appointment as consul general to France and says that James Blaine needed his recommendation. So Charles pulls out a pre-written recommendation and asks Logan to sign. So
did he sign it?
Wow.
No. He manages to brush him off somehow. But a few days later, Charles corners Logan again, telling him, I used to live in Chicago, you're my senator, so you owe me a recommendation, and shoved the same recommendation in his face.
Wow.
That's wild.
Because Logan was a senator from Illinois, but like if you leave Illinois, he's not still your senator. So the next time Logan brushes him off saying, I'll speak to the Secretary of State about it. At this point, James Blaine had his chief clerk instruct the staff, do not forward his notes and keep him away from me.
Finally, someone being like, hey, you gotta get him away from me. He's clearly like gonna keep stalking me. You gotta not let him be around here anymore.
But Charles kept stalking him anyway.
Of course, yeah.
And eventually, after he has been pestering him for 2 months, James Blaine becomes the first person to tell Charles Guiteau the truth. He has zero chance of getting the job, and then told him, quote, never speak to me about the Paris consulship again as long as you live.
This guy is so patient. 2 months? There's no way I would wait that long. This guy every day probably coming up to me, handing me this stupid ass speech. Like, please, you have to sign this recommendation.
Please.
This guy's persistent, though. That's commendable.
So on May 18th, 1881, Charles gets an idea from God. If the president was out of the way, everything would go better.
What,
no.
Out of the way?
Oh, no.
What do you mean out of the way? Uh-oh.
He liked James Garfield as a man. He didn't want to believe this message from God, but you see, Garfield was influenced by that son of a bitch, James Blaine. Charles tried to fight the message, writing to Garfield, I have been trying to be your friend. I do not know whether you appreciate it or not, and told him that he'd visit the next morning. But by this point, Charles' letters are getting filtered out, and they were letting him visit, but he started getting really aggressive while he was there, so now he's barred from visiting the White House, too. And the Secretary Brown orders to keep him away from the White House. So Charles stops visiting the White House, he stops trying to get a job, and he prays for a sign that he should not kill the president. By July 1st, he has not received that sign, and he makes up his mind and starts preparing.
Oh my God.
Charles' first thought was, quote, I thought just what people would talk and thought what a tremendous excitement it would create. And I kept thinking about it all week. Charles,
not like, oh man, I'm going to kill a guy, but like, oh, how exciting. Like people are going to be talking about how I killed the president.
People are going to be real jazzed about this. Charles' second thought was to edit a book that he wrote years prior, The Truth, A Companion to the Bible. He believed that killing James Garfield would draw attention to his book, which would save souls, and which is why God wanted him to kill the president.
my god.
Oh my god, I have to kill the president so that my Bible DLC flies off the shelves and saves people.
Yeah, basically.
Oh my god. That's insane.
His book was almost entirely plagiarized from a book John Noyes wrote in Oneida.
It's not even his book. He just took it.
Apparently some people would like show him, look, these passages are the exact same, and he would just ignore them.
Oh my god.
So one of the people he had borrowed a bunch of money from in the past was George Maynard. And so obviously by this point he owes Maynard a lot of money. People know that a loan to Charles Guiteau is not getting paid back. And on this visit, Maynard thought he looked a little different from usual, but the principal thing was that he looked hungry. Mostly, he figured he knows Charles is a good fellow, so he lent him the money.
Why do you know that? What does that mean? Everyone everywhere is like, this guy is stalking people. He will never pay your money back. All right.
It's probably the
This
same
is
thing
clearly
that-
a guy I have to give money to. He looks hungry.
It's probably the same
Give
thing
him
that Andy thought
food.
when she first met him. Was like, oh, look, he prays so much. So Charles takes the money that he was loaned for food and immediately goes and buys a revolver.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
Jesus. Okay.
So Charles knows exactly what's going to happen after he shoots the president. He knows that he will not be a free man anymore. He will either be dead or behind bars. So he decides he's going to go check out the local jail. Quote, I wanted to see what kind of jail it was. I knew nothing about where it was, nor the character of the building, nor anything. So Charles walks to the jail, rings the doorbell to the warden's office, and asks the guard for a tour.
He's doing a fucking house tour for the jail he's about to go to after he assassinates the president.
Yeah.
How is there no, like, thought between those things?
There is a thought in between those things. It's, man, people are going to be so fucking psyched when I do this.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
The guard tells him that the jail doesn't allow tours on Saturday, so he left, but he felt he got a good feel for the place. Quote, I thought it was a very excellent jail. It's the best jail in America, I understand.
Oh, yeah, because he wouldn't be caught dead in the second best jail in America. Be the best one.
Also, how the fuck would you know? You didn't get a tour.
You didn't get a tour. Also, did you go
went
to any
the
other
warden's
prison?
office.
I don't think you went to any other jail.
No. Well, I mean,
So-
I guess he spent time in various jails for not paying hotel rooms.
I guess.
But again, he didn't get a tour. He just walked to the warden's office, was told there are no tours, and was like, good enough. I got a feel
I got
for
a
the
good
place.
vibe. This must be the best jail.
So Charles wants to find a place where the president's guard will be down. He follows him around and decides it would be best to shoot him while he's at church, a guaranteed spot in his schedule every week. So on June 12th, he
Dang.
waits in church not far. Go ahead.
Just like disrespecting the church, man.
He said something about like if you're shooting a guy in church like on God's will, it's better or something. Like he didn't think it was a desecration. He thought it was almost better.
It's good for the DLC.
It's good for the
Yeah.
DLC.
For the DLC. Yeah.
So on June 12th, he waits in church not far from the president, planning to shoot him when he has the chance for a clear shot with no harm to bystanders. But both Charles Guiteau and James Garfield were distracted by what the president called, quote, a very stupid sermon on a very great subject. I don't know
Damn.
exactly what it was. I just know that nobody seemed to agree with the priest during that sermon, to the degree that Charles yelled out at one point, "What think ye of Christ?" Which Garfield
okay.
actually wrote about in his own diary. He heard Charles yell that.
Amazing.
He wrote about a dull young man with a loud voice trying to pound noise into the question. So the sermon passes and Charles doesn't take his chance. But he knows the next Saturday, Garfield and his wife are due to take a train to New Jersey. And so he gets up and gets ready to make his second attempt at an assassination. But the
Do you
first
think
lady...
he was just like... Sorry, do you think he was just like so angry about how bad the sermon was that he was like, I can't kill...
I
I
really
can't kill the
think that's what
president
it
at
was.
this bad a sermon?
I
That's
think he was
crazy.
legitimately
That
distracted
is
by a
crazy.
bad sermon.
Yeah.
So the next Saturday, he knows that James Garfield and Lucretia Garfield are going to take a train trip to New Jersey. But Lucretia Garfield had nearly died of illness over the prior few months. She's very small and frail at this point. And Charles didn't have the heart to shoot her husband in front of her. He noted her thinness and said, she clung so tenderly to the president's arm that I did not have the heart to fire on him. Charles looks ahead to June 27th, when he knows that President Garfield will be back at the train station again on his return trip. But he passed on his chance because he didn't feel like it.
Okay, he ran out of excuses this time.
No, this one was legit just I don't wanna.
Next time.
So on July 1st, the president has a full day of meetings and dinners. Leaves the White House, walks to Secretary of State Blaine's house. And as he leaves, he's watched from a park bench across the street by Charles Guiteau, the same bench where he was hoping to hear of his appointment to a consulate. And so he follows him to Blaine's house, and Blaine and Garfield go for a walk, speaking in hushed tones, probably about top secret politics shit of the day. And Charles was just pissed off to see the two together. He liked James Garfield, but probably because Blaine was the first person to tell him, no, you're not getting that job, he fucking hated James Blaine. And so he was cursing the way the president, quote, sold himself body and soul to Blaine on that walk.
You were just talking to him, man. It's not that deep.
It's the president and the Secretary of State. They're going to discuss things.
Yeah.
Again, Charles chooses not to act this night, but the image of Garfield and Blaine chatting together was burned in his mind. He knew that Garfield was going on a train trip again the next day, and he would be back at that train station. So, July 2nd, Charles wakes up at 5 a.m., having moved to the Riggs House Hotel where he was once stalking politicians. He wanted a really nice room the night before he did the deed. He skipped out of his previous boarding house arrangement the night after, promising to pay for his room in a day or two, leading to the landlady putting an ad in the newspaper seeking him. He gathers his gun, several letters he had written, and the truth, to which he had attached a note addressed to the New York Herald, giving them permission to print it, recommending it be done over 1 or 2 sections a day.
Wow.
So one of his letters is addressed to General William Tecumseh Sherman, beginning, "To General Sherman, I have just shot the president. I shot him several times as I wished him to go as easily as possible. His death was a political necessity." The letter goes on to say that he supported Grant in the caucus and told Sherman to take possession of the jail at once. Thinks the guy's going to spring him. Another letter is addressed to the White House, saying, "The president's tragic death was a sad necessity, but it will unite the Republican Party and save the Republic. Life is a fleeting dream, and it matters little when one goes. I presume the president was a Christian and that he will be happier in paradise than here." So Charles makes his way to the train station where Garfield's going to travel from, and he finds a carriage driver to take him to jail after the shooting on his own terms. The guy gives him his price, and he tells him, I'm not sure right now, but I'll check with you in a few minutes whether I need your services. Goes to a newsstand and asks the guy if he can leave some packages with him. The guy says yes, and he leaves the book and letters there. So James Garfield arrives at Potomac Station, and Guiteau is waiting for him right by the entrance. Garfield walks in, and Charles raises his revolver and fires 2 shots into the president's back as Garfield shouts, "My God, what is this?" So immediately, the crowd is pissed. They turn on Charles, and if officers didn't put him in custody quickly, they probably would have ripped him apart. He immediately turns to an officer and says, "I want to go to jail."
What?
Wow. All right.
So Officer Kearney starts hauling him outside. And then Charles starts shouting, "I have something important to say! I have something important to say!" and pulls out the letter for Sherman that he kept on him, insisting this needs to be delivered to General Sherman. And Kearney assures him it will be. But once Charles is in custody, all of his worries melt away. You see, Vice President Arthur would obviously be thrilled with him now that he would be president. And Charles scouted out the jail. He knew where to be. He told the detective sitting next to him in the police carriage, "You stick to me and have me put in the 3rd story, front at the jail. General Sherman is coming down to take charge. Arthur and all those men are my friends, and I'll have you made chief of police."
Wow. Okay.
So Charles settles into his cell and sends a letter to Vice President Arthur, offering advice on picking his cabinet members and reminding him, "You're only about to become president because I made Garfield president."
Wow.
Meanwhile, President Garfield is bleeding on the floor of the train station. One bullet went through his right arm and came out the other side. The other lodged itself in his back to the right of his spine, breaking 2 of his ribs. Dr. Smith Townsend was the first physician to appear, 5 minutes after the shooting. He gives the president half an ounce of brandy and then pokes an unsterilized finger in his back to try to find the bullet. Soon after this, Charles Purvis would arrive, a 39-year-old doctor who would become the first black man to treat a president. Garfield asked them what his odds were, and he was told 1 chance in 100, and he said, "We will take that chance, doctor." Robert Todd
That's hard.
Lincoln. Yeah, no, honestly, a lot of what he said goes pretty hard. Robert Todd Lincoln, son of Abraham, couldn't help but recall his father's death, as he was now watching his 2nd presidential assassination go down. And he mused, "My God, how many hours of sorrow I have passed in this town." But he's determined to not let this be the 2nd presidential death he's around for. He rushes to his carriage, and he seeks out Dr. D.W. Bliss, who was present at his father's bedside years ago, and who grew up near where Garfield did in Ohio, so he's a familiar face. Quick sidebar to talk about D.W. Bliss. D.W. Bliss was born in Brutus, New York to Obadiah Bliss and Marilla Poole. His first initials, D.W., were him being named after the doctor who delivered him, Dr. Samuel Willard. Think about that. Where do we get D.W. from Dr. Samuel Willard?
The doctor part.
Yeah.
Dr. Willard.
Yeah.
D.W.
So his first name is Doctor. his real full name is Dr. Willard Bliss.
Wild.
He lives up to his name and goes to the Cleveland Medical College, making him Dr. Willard Bliss. Along the way, he found himself treating a bunch of high-ranking people. He treats future President Zachary Taylor. In 1853, though, he was expelled from the Washington, D.C. Medical Society for his faith in homeopathy, declaring the plant Kundarango as a cure for cancer, syphilis, scrofula, ulcer, and all other chronic blood diseases. And also kicked out because he was against their opposition to having black members. James Garfield knew him at the time and insisted, wear this as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
During the American Civil War, Dr. Bliss was a surgeon with the 3rd Michigan Infantry and eventually became superintendent of the capital city's Armory Square Hospital until he was jailed for several days for accepting a bribe to use an inventor's new stove in the hospital. And after he got his fierce reprisal for supporting homeopathy, he figured that he would stick to normal traditional medicine and not take any of these crazy new theories, like Joseph Lister's new theories on antiseptic and germ theory. So the president was in great hands. So D.W. Bliss shows up and becomes the second doctor to poke around the bullet wound with unwashed hands. Charles Purvis, the black doctor, insisted he should stop the examination right now and not finger the bullet hole anymore. But Dr. Bliss but Dr. Bliss picks up a probe made of flexible silver and put it into Garfield's back, quote, downward and forward and downward and backward in several directions to the horror of Dr. Purvis. A few more hours pass and President Garfield insists that he be taken back to the White House. They say that moving him is dangerous and the White House isn't a great place to do medical treatment, but anything is probably better than a random empty room in the second floor of a train station. So the First Lady rushes back to see James, and when she arrives, she gets a very bad prognosis. None of the doctors are expecting the president to live. She sees him, and he tries to talk about plans for after he's gone, but she hushes him and says, I'm here to nurse you back to life. Please do not speak again of death. So at the White House, 10 different doctors show up and start examining the president. But Dr. Bliss takes control from the beginning and makes himself in charge and starts giving all the other doctors orders. And they all figure, well, he's ordering everyone around. They must have put him in charge.
Oh, no.
For 5 years, Garfield's personal physician was Dr. Jedediah Hyde Baxter. He got there late because he was visiting a friend in Pennsylvania at the time of the shooting. And when he finally does show up, Dr. Bliss is laying on a sofa in the room next to the president, dictating a letter to be given to the other doctors. And he sees Baxter and tells him to take a seat. And he explains to him it wouldn't be proper for Dr. Baxter to see the president. And Dr. Baxter says, I have been the president's personal physician for 5 years, to which Dr. Bliss says, you may have been his physician for 10 years for aught I know, but you are not his physician this morning. And then he accuses Baxter of trying to steal the case from him and lobbying other doctors to usurp his role of head doctor.
Okay.
Dr. Baxter does not want to have a shouting match in the room next to a dying president, so he just angrily storms out. And this was the main person who was likely to take the spot from Bliss, so Bliss is now firmly in charge of the case. He sends the dictated letter to the other doctors that tells them that Garfield is doing so well, he doesn't need any of them anymore. So every doctor other than Bliss goes home.
Oh, no.
Oh, dude. Oh, my God.
Later, it comes out that he just kind of took over the case and he publicly defended himself, saying that both the president and first lady asked him to take control. And then Lucretia publicly contradicted this, which pissed him off. She sought out 2 of her own doctors to look over the president and be her own eyes. Dr. Susan Ann Edson, who was her personal physician and one of the first women doctors in the country, and Dr. Silas Boynton, who was the president's cousin, another familiar face. So they show up at the first lady's request. Bliss tries to push them away, but they're on the first lady's orders, not his. So they stick around. But he insists that they could only perform nursing duties. They would not be consulted as full, proper physicians. And they agree just so that someone can be keeping an eye on the president for the first lady. Meanwhile, someone heard of the news of the president getting shot. Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone. He was thinking of filthy doctors just shoving their hands in wounds, and he knew there had to be a better way to find a bullet in someone. A few years earlier, he had filed a patent for a metal detector, and he immediately got to work adapting it. After a couple of days of work, he sends a letter to Dr. Bliss offering his services. Bliss had fought really hard to make himself the only person of influence in the case with the president, but Bell was a famous inventor, and he knew that he couldn't just turn him away without listening to him. So Bell visits, he explains his process to Bliss. For 2 weeks, the president is confined to his bed, unable to walk, unable to sit up. He had a lifetime of stomach issues to the degree that once he declined a doctor's recommendation to remove part of his intestines. So he kept a very plain diet that was unlikely to upset the stomach. Very just basic foods. But Bliss updated his diet and was giving him very rich, dense foods like bacon, steak, and potatoes on top of a daily dose of rum, wine, and an injection of morphine. And now President Garfield was just violently throwing up all the time.
Oof.
But he was in very high spirits the entire time. He was suffering big time, but his doctors jokingly called him a wonderfully patient sufferer. And they noted that he was always trying to talk to people and he was always extending a hand to thank them for their efforts. And he focused his conversations on lifting the spirits of the people visiting him. Very charismatic, friendly guy. You know who else was in high spirits at this time? Was Charles Guiteau.
No, dude.
Quote, I felt lighthearted and merry the moment I got into that cell. The weight of the act was lifted from him and he was eating up the fame. There was a reporter that said of him, his vanity is literally nauseating. Guiteau has an idea that the civilized world is holding its breath waiting to hear of the minutest details of his career. He would get very mad when people interrupted him, suggesting they destroyed a train of thought that was leading somewhere very important, and he was always asking reporters to describe everything about him in great detail. There was a photographer who showed up to the prison to take his picture, and Charles was trying to coach him on how to get a very good picture of him. And before the photographer left, he asked him for a $25 royalty fee.
Wow.
Even while he was in jail, Charles was planning ways to get money. Obviously, his book is flying off the shelves right now. There's no doubt about that. He would go on a speaking tour. That would obviously be another few $1,000s. And he planned to auction off the suit that he was wearing when he shot the president. Throughout the whole thing, he was convinced that he was never going to be convicted, with the vice president and the general public definitely on his side. He offered the New York Herald his autobiography, and he added a note with this saying, I'm looking for a wife and see no objection to mentioning it here. I want an elegant Christian lady of wealth, under 30, belonging to a first-class family. Any such lady can address me in the utmost confidence.
The confidence in this gentleman is, I guess we're studying.
It's staggering, yeah. Alongside this, he also announced his candidacy for president.
Oh, of course.
I just spat my water out.
Quote, for 20 years, I have had an idea that I should be president. My idea is that I shall be nominated and elected as Lincoln and Garfield were. Notably, the last two presidents to be shot. So throughout all this, the president is not allowed a lot of visitors by Dr. Bliss. His friend from the military, Almond Rockwell, commented, there was never a moment that the dear general was left alone, and yet when one thinks of the loneliness in which his great spirit lived, the heart is almost ready to break. Even his children were barely able to visit him, and the Secretary of State didn't get to see him until a month after the shooting and was ushered out after just 6 minutes.
Damn.
Bliss defended the limitations on visitors by saying that with a bullet in his torso, talking would move his diaphragm and therefore his liver, where Bliss believed the bullet was. Garfield questioned the decision, saying, it moves when I breathe. So, what's the deal with that? And Bliss said, well, you see, breathing is a gentle action, talking is a violent action. Meanwhile, several times a day, they are shoving unsterilized tools or fingers into his wound to look for the bullet. By July 26th, Alexander Graham Bell had tested a primitive X-ray machine on a Civil War veteran. He was worried it wasn't strong enough, getting only very faint signals, but there was a dip in the president's health, and Dr. Bliss was worried that time was running out and requested that Bell experiment further with his device on the president. So the next day, Bell arrives in Washington, D.C. with his device and he tests it. He explains to the president how it works, and Garfield rolls onto his left side. They agreed that Bell would listen to the machine searching for metal in the president's body, but Dr. Bliss made it clear that he would operate the exploring arm and decide which areas to examine. So he waved the arm over the wound and the area below it, and they didn't hear anything. They put the president on his back and they try again, passing over his abdomen. And Bell thinks he hears a sudden sound at one point, but he can't find it again. Eventually, the president gets tired and they call it quits. Bell goes home. He feels humiliated and disappointed that he failed. But at his lab the next morning, he discovers that he set up the condenser wrong. The test was just no good. And he resolves he's going to come back and try again. Dr. Bliss is only getting more and more worried at the president's state, and it leads to him seizing more control from what little he had signed away to the assistants. A month after the shooting, he is doing everything. He's even taking the president's temperature himself several times a day, and he's barely leaving the bedside and barely sleeping himself. He wrote a letter to a friend around this time where he underlined every single word in the sentence, "I cannot afford to have him die."
You were the one who decided, like, yes, I'm going to take this completely from everyone else, make it completely my deal. And now that it's going wrong, like, yeah, man, later, obviously everyone is going to blame you if the president dies.
So he asked Bell to come back to the White House. Bell's been refining his design ever since his first attempt, and he ran another test with a veteran, and he found a bullet on him very easily. Shows back up to the White House on August 1st, but Dr. Bliss has a restriction for him. The president's getting tired very easily, and we do not have infinite time. So Bell was not going to be permitted to waste time looking for the bullet where they knew it wouldn't be. He would examine the president's right side and only his right side, aligning with where Bliss believed the bullet was. So Bell uses his device, and he examines the suspected bullet location, and he hears a sound. He seeks a second opinion from his assistant, and his assistant agrees. And then he seeks a third opinion, having the First Lady tell him if she heard something. And she does. He's really not sure of these results, but he's worried that because they expected to find something there, he might imagine a difference that didn't exist. And he later wrote, "In the absence of any other apparent cause for the phenomenon, I was forced to agree in the conclusion that it was due to the presence of the bullet. I was by no means satisfied, however, with the results." He goes back to his lab and he thinks on it. And shortly thereafter, he comes right back to the White House and he asks the surgeons if they are absolutely sure they got all of the metal from the area of the bed. And they say, yes, they have. They took everything away from the bed with its metal springs. And so obviously an x-ray isn't going to work very well when you're doing it on the other side of a bunch of metal.
Yeah.
So Bell asks to get an exact copy of the president's bed so he can do more tests. And he's making progress on this until he receives news from his wife. He had not really been paying a lot of attention to his wife. He has kind of went full bore in his quest to save the president. But then his wife has a premature birth in Boston. He rushes to her side, and that kind of ends the experiment with Alexander Graham Bell's X-ray machine. So on August 8th, Dr. Bliss directs surgery on the president to facilitate the escape of pus. He has his assistant, David Hayes Agnew, who is chief of surgery at the University of Pennsylvania, make an incision past the 12th rib, following what he thought was the track of the bullet. But what he thought was the track of the bullet was actually a heavily infected hole created by a month of doctors shoving their fingers into a bullet wound without washing their hands and wiggling them around inside.
Yeah, of course.
Dr. Fingering getting in the way.
Yeah. Grossness warning, Garfield's body was producing so much pus that it was getting other people sick too.
Oh,
Dr. Bliss cut himself on a knife that he didn't notice was hidden under a sheet and got an infection of pus fever so bad that he was carrying his hand in a sling. While his hand was in the sling...
That sounds like something out of Warhammer.
Right?
Pus fever.
Pus fever. Nurgle gave him the pus fever.
Yeah.
So while he has his hand in this sling, he gives an interview where he says there is no evidence of blood infection in the president's case whatsoever. And in fact, quote, the wound is in such a state that causes us no apprehension whatsoever.
Oh my.
So on top of a gunshot wound and a massive infection, now they're getting to have a new concern with the president's case. Starvation. In the month and a half since he had been shot, the president had lost 80 pounds, now sitting at 6 feet tall, 130. One of his doctors privately told a reporter he had reached the limit of what a man can lose and yet live. Even before losing his appetite, he was vomiting so often that very little of what he ate stayed down. At best, he was able to keep down a little bit of oatmeal, and he hated oatmeal, so he's having a great time. Every once in a while, he got to have a fresh glass of milk, though. He was a big fan of milk. And a company from Baltimore sent a sent him a cow that was living on the front of the White House, and the White House cook would get him a glass of fresh squeezed milk every day that she sprinkled holy water into.
No. They discovered pasteurization at this point, didn't they? But they were like, nah, we're just gonna give whole raw milk.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about the history of pasteurization. Through the magic of editing.
There's just so much, like, just problem after problem.
Yeah,
it just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, at this point, they were definitely still drinking raw milk. This was fresh squeezed raw milk.
Oh, fuck.
Not from concentrate.
So, Dr. Bliss had a novel solution to the president's starvation and frequent vomiting. Enemata. If that term doesn't mean anything to you, the other way it's referred to is rectal feeding.
No.
Oh, no.
So Dr. Willard Bliss would dissolve beef bouillon in hydrochloric acid to pre-digest it, would rinse it off to get the acid off, and then mix it with milk, egg yolk, and a little bit of opium.
Oh my god. Oh no.
Then
he's got ghosts in his bones.
Then every 4 hours, night and day, he would have it injected into the president's ass.
Oh my god.
Every 4 hours?
Every 4 hours. 6 times a day.
Oh my god.
At one point,
I would be like, just let me die.
Just
like,
fucking die, please.
It's not worth it. Like,
I like how it started with Charles Guiteau, and then it's like, oh no, there's someone else that's also equally as just inept. Insane.
Yeah, not quite as egotistical, but still like on that level of like, oh.
Poking around in the bullet hole is one thing. Now you're shoving something else in a whole different hole that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah. It was like beef bouillon fucking in acid that we just like rinsed off. That's fine.
Mixed with
eggs,
milk, eggs, and opium.
Yeah. Oh my god.
it sounds like a D&D campaign, and you're like, oh, I gotta solve this puzzle. What do we have in our inventory, guys?
Just throwing shit at the wall. Yeah.
Hydrochloric acid. I got this beef bouillon. Oh yeah, let's add some opium to that. I got this syringe we found off a dead goblin.
You gotta imagine the milk was just because, like, oh, like he just likes milk, so let's just throw milk in there too.
And like, would the acid curdle the milk? Like, there's no way they're getting all the acid off. So you just have like lumpy.
Oh god! Oh, Phi! Oh my god!
There was one point when, for a period of 8 days, the president received no substance other than rectal feeding. Eventually, he would start to change the mixture, just at a whim. One day, he would add whiskey, and the next day, he would replace the egg yolk with charcoal. It was constantly changing. The president was also horribly dehydrated, another problem that was only getting worse. He lost fluid when he was shot, he had been vomiting nonstop, he was fever sweating, they were draining pus, and Dr. Bliss was constantly giving him almost daily prescriptions of various alcohols. So he's starving, dehydrated, sick, drunk, and high on opium just all the time.
Constantly getting syringes up the ass every 4 hours. That's miserable.
One correct diagnosis that Dr. Bliss made, right after he brushed off far more serious concerns of the president's health, was when he was expressing the president is just exhausted. And the president confided in Lucretia, I wonder if all this fight against death is worth the little pinch of life I will get anyway.
Damn.
She knew that what he wanted more than anything was an escape from what he was going through. And Dr. Bliss refused to allow it, but the president told him, it's all right now. I want to get away. On September 5th, the president sought to escape the heat of Washington and see the ocean one more time, and they specially prepared a train to take him to Elberon, New Jersey. He was carried in the train on a stretcher as he left the White House for the final time. The train burned special anthracite coal to not spew dust that would irritate the president, and train conductors ahead were informed of the trip where they switched off their engines to give him a quiet, comfortable ride. Bliss arranged for private homes to be available along the way if they needed to stop at any point, and crowds were gathering at every train station on the route, watching silently as the train carried the president to his final destination. A rich New Yorker offered his summer home in Elberon for use by the president, and when the president arrived, he did so on railway tracks that they laid the previous night to take his train right up to the doors of the building. A surveyor told a homeowner that the track would have to cut through her garden, and she replied, "I am willing that you should ruin my house, all I have, if it would help to save him." The track had a small problem, in that it was taking the train to a cottage atop a hill. And when the locomotive reached the hill, it became apparent to the waiting crowd that the engine was not strong enough to make it up the hill, when, according to Dr. Bliss, instantly hundreds of strong arms caught the cars and silently rolled the 3 heavy coaches up the hill. So, just some cartoon stuff. That's the climax of a cartoon, when everyone's like, "Guys, the president's train can't make it, let's all help!"
Yeah.
Eat a can of spinach.
Yeah. A few days later, Dr. Bliss issued a bulletin announcing that all the remaining physicians had been dismissed other than his surgeons Agnew and Hamilton. You see, this is because Garfield was doing so good, there was no point in them being there.
Oh my god, dude, we're literally taking him to, like, his final, like, view of the ocean, and you're still like, yeah, he's doing great, guys.
He said that President Garfield had, quote, "a clearer road to recovery now than he has ever had. The trouble has now passed its crisis and is going away."
If he digs the hole any deeper, he's gonna get into China. This is, jeez, man.
I get everything up to that point, because, like, I imagine he still saw a way out. How are you seeing a way out at this point? You took the man to die where he wanted to die, and you're just telling everyone, everything's great. He's doing so good.
I mean, he already fucked up by, like, doubling down on the initial. Like, it would have been so much better if you just, like, yeah, like, things are going bad.
Yeah.
And,
yeah,
like, I'm trying my best, but things are bad. Like, that, you would take such less of a hit than being like, nope, everything's great. Oh, wow, he died suddenly. That's weird. Has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, after, like, deploying the raw milk enema, he's gotta give up.
Especially
That's
because,
gotta be
like,
the quote of the episode.
Everyone thought, like, right after he shot, that there was no way he was going to live. If you were honest from the beginning, you could have been like, yeah, there was no way he was going to live, but I kept him alive for 2 months. Like, you
probably would have been commended. Like, yeah, like I did my best and I kept him alive 2 months longer than he probably would have lived otherwise.
So on September 19th at 10 p.m., while he's being visited by General David Swaim, Garfield gasped and said, "Well, Swaim, oh my, Swaim, what a pain I have right here," as he clutched his heart. Swaim sends for Dr. Bliss, who tries to save him, but on 10:35 p.m. on September 19th, President James Garfield is pronounced dead. The autopsy, as we can all figure out, showed that Dr. Bliss was nowhere close on the president's location. It did not find its way beside the liver, but the pancreas, on the complete opposite side of the body that he forbade Alexander Graham Bell from testing.
Of course.
The autopsy also noted the long descending channel that was made by the doctor's own fingers and instruments, and found that his body was absolutely riddled with infection, just everywhere. When the autopsy was done, Dr. Agnew ran his finger down the president's spinal column and found the vertebrae pierced by the bullet. Then he pulled his hand out and said to the room, "Gentlemen, this was the fatal wound. We made a mistake," and left the room without another word. In jail, Charles's confidence in his acquittal is starting to fade a little bit. General Sherman did actually show up, like he expected him to, but it wasn't to return Charles to the public. It was to keep the public from storming the jail and claiming his head. Around 2 months after being jailed, Charles was standing near his cell window watching a changing of the guard, and one of those prison's guards that was changing out, Sergeant William Mason, took a shot at him and missed.
Damn.
Mason was sentenced to 8 years in prison, but refused to apologize or express any kind of remorse. He said he was tired of coming to work every day only to protect a dog like Charles Guiteau. Mason was supported throughout the country, and newspapers received letters where readers were brainstorming creative ways to kill Charles, ranging from feeding him to dogs to feeding him 2 ounces of his own flesh every day. Like, it was a wild
they should have just
article
done they should have done the enema that they did the fucking president on this guy.
Shove things up Charles' ass till he dies.
Opium, 2 ounces of his own flesh, raw milk, and hydrochloric acid.
Yeah.
One person wrote, "There is an American judge whose decisions are almost always just and whose work is always well done. His name is Judge Lynch."
Jesus.
Damn.
Charles was not told when the president finally died of his wounds. He overheard it from a guard outside and immediately started praying. So now that the president's fate was sealed, people were looking to the fate of his assassin. Charles got his brother-in-law, George Scoville, to represent him, and on October 14th, Charles Guiteau submitted his plea to the court. Insanity, and that it was God's act and not mine. The divine pressure on me to remove the president was so enormous that it destroyed my free agency, and therefore I am not legally responsible for my act. It's literally insane because God made me do it.
Wild.
He also wrote how confident he was that God would see him as a free and innocent man. This was not the full point of his defense, though. The judge refused to allow him an opening statement, but he had written his intended opening statement down on business cards and started handing them to reporters behind him.
Oh my god. Every time he's got a business card for everything.
He's always got something to hand people.
Can he have a finished speech on a business card?
So, I'm curious what you guys think of Charles's defense here, in that he argued he did not kill James Garfield. James Garfield's doctors killed James Garfield.
I mean, technically, he's correct. I mean, he's like a catalyst, or like the thing that started it all, but like...
Definitely there's an argument to be made that they did significantly more damage than he did.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I know that more modern medical analysis of it has said that if they literally left him the fuck alone, he might have lived.
Damn.
Because like something about how his body calcified the area around the bullets and just perfectly isolated it. But then they just fucking shoved their fingers in there and made a bigger and bigger hole.
Oh yeah, because it did go like right into the spine, so it would have just been like surrounded by bone.
Quote from Charles: General Garfield died from malpractice. According to his own physicians, he was not fatally shot. The doctors who mistreated him ought to bear the odium of his death and not his assailant. They ought to be indicted for murdering James A. Garfield and not me.
I mean, I think the answer is that they both need to take ownership of that death.
Yeah.
You definitely played a role, Charles.
That's a team effort.
Yeah. You can't be like, I didn't do nothing. I'm being blamed for nothing. Like that is insane. You started all of this.
You're playing like PUBG and you're like, this is duos.
Yeah.
No, I just had the assist. So he didn't get to make that opening statement, but a few days later, there was a witness who was describing the scene at the train station at the time of shooting. And Charles cut her off saying, I deny the killing, if your honor please. We admit the shooting. So Charles, ever desperate for fame, just kept inserting himself into court proceedings. A lot of the time, he was critiquing his brother-in-law's representation of his case.
Oh my god, dude.
Bro.
There was one time that he told him, in front of everyone, you spoil everything by cross-examination. You are a jackass on the question of cross-examination. I must tell you that right in public to your face.
Wow. I think there's a little more pressing matters, dude. Like, I think...
The judge didn't want to give Charles any chance at all of having a proper appeal, so he didn't throw him out of the court. Instead, just every time he had an outburst, he moved him further and further away from the witness stand until he was presumably just in the back of the room shouting. He later wrote that Charles Guiteau's declarations, quote, could not have been prevented except by resorting to the process of gagging him. As the case went on, more and more experts were called to examine him, and more people agreed unquestionably that he belonged in an insane asylum. But Charles tried to stress that he was only insane at the time of shooting. He was fine before, and he's fine now.
Oh my god.
He interrupted an expert once to say, I shot the president on the 2nd of July. I would not do it again for $1 million with the mind I have now. People were very impatient with the results of the trial, and their hatred for Charles continued to shine. There was one day when the carriage was taking him back to prison after the day's court proceedings, and a farmer climbed the carriage, pulled his pistol, and tried to shoot Charles, just leaving a hole in his coat because he was very close.
Damn.
After 2 months of testimony, the jury returned a guilty verdict, and Charles shouted from the back of the court, my blood will be on the head of the jury, don't you forget it. That is my answer. God will avenge this outrage. I think they're fine with that, dude. Yeah.
It sounds like everyone hates you. I don't know. I think they're okay with killing you.
Like, I don't know if I've ever read of the populace of the country hating an individual more than this. Everyone wanted to see Charles die.
Yeah. Like a random farmer, you said?
Just a random
like quick farmer. Drawing him?
Yeah.
That's it. Like it's crazy.
Rushed the carriage, climbed to the top, and shot at him. Even still, Charles was convinced that there was a chance he'd get out. He kept
Still?
He
Dude.
kept writing to President Arthur on several occasions demanding a full pardon. After his appeal was denied by the Supreme Court, he wrote to President Arthur saying, "I made you, and the least you can do is let me go."
I was about to ask if he used the same line of, like, I made you president because I got rid of the other one. What the fuck?
I really just hope he included a copy of the speech.
Oh, I'm sure he did. He had to have.
But there would be no appeals, no pardons, and no saviors. And on June 30th, 1882, Charles Guiteau was hanged from the gallows. Dr. Willard Bliss would spend years defending his decisions and treating the president, to the degree where he wrote a full treatise called Feeding per Rectum, as illustrated in the case of the late President Garfield and others, where he laid out his process, explained other people who had done the same, and stood by his actions, claiming that rectal feeding has been in use since the ancient Egyptians, and a colleague had done so for over a year once. Thankfully, I don't think his ideas were ever picked up at all, because they're fucking insane.
Yeah.
In 2014, the CIA would declassify a summary of 6,000-page report on torture techniques, and one of the techniques listed to deal with detainees engaging in a hunger strike was rectal feeding.
Oh my god.
Literally a torture technique used on the president.
Oh, why?
Wild.
So to wind this down, we're going to rewind back to a few weeks after he got shot, to a point when President Garfield was starting to take a turn for the worse, and he was getting too weak to hold a pen. He was getting visited by his friend from the military, Almond Rockwell, and he asked him for a piece of paper and something to write on. And he got the piece of paper and he got a pen, and on it he wrote the Latin phrase, Strangulatus pro Republica, tortured for the Republic. And that is episode 4.
Yeah. What a story.
Amazing. So, I apparently know this story already. But the way I know the story is about the first air conditioner.
Oh, did they use that here?
Yeah. I know it from like a different podcast, but they only talked about why the situation the first air conditioner was created, not like Charles Guiteau. Like it's like the two puzzle pieces are like locked together now. And I was like, this isn't the president was the first air conditioner. I was just thinking the whole entire time, and you're like, oh, they started sticking his finger in him. I'm like, oh, this is him. This is it. This is the other side of the story. Oh shit!
It is nice that at least he had that little bit of comfort. it does make me feel better that during this whole hellacious ordeal, he at least got to be the first one to enjoy air conditioning.
So can we say that gunshot invented X-ray and air conditioning?
Yeah,
kinda.
Yep.
That's crazy.
If Charles Guiteau was alive today, he would put it on his LinkedIn resume.
Along with the speech.
Yeah, he would put his speech on there as like writer of Garfield versus Hancock would be on his LinkedIn. And his whole profile would just be the speech. What's actually one part that's not really super related to this story, or I guess a little bit, is that when President McKinley was later shot, Bell was actually demonstrating a different form of the X-ray machine nearby at the World's Fair, and they just didn't bother using it. And it probably would have saved his life.
Damn.
Which also, Robert Todd Lincoln was present at that too, was his third presidential assassination. And then he just refused to ever be involved in government ever again or be near presidents, which, fair.
Yeah, he was like, I'm probably a bad omen or something.
Yeah,
like 3 times.
Hey everyone, thanks for sitting in on episode number 4 of I Am the Lore Keeper, Tortured for the Republic. The main source for this episode was Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard, and I also leaned on the National Park Service, PBS, and the Journal of the Illinois State Historical Society. And thank you so much for sitting in on this one. I'll catch you on number 5. Or one of the other ones if you're going backwards. Do whatever you want. I can't stop you.